Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're back and we are continuing to study A Course in Miracles. We're going to be talking about the textbook. We're studying chapter 2. And tonight, if you're following along, we're going to be discussing this book called A Course in Miracles, the CIMS edition, Course in Miracles Society edition. This is the Your Text version and really is the original, as true as it could be kept transcript, the communication from Jesus to Helen Schachtman without a lot of editing or without anything really being taken out. Now we do have major sections and we have chapters and we have subheadings and so forth. But the text itself is really what was streamed live to Helen Schachtman. And so tonight we're going to be continuing our conversation, and we're on page 23, and we're going to pick up with paragraph 36. We'll start there with the atonement. But before we get started, I just want to say hello and welcome. Appreciate you being here. Just trying to get a little settled here as we get started. Why don't we take a moment together and let's just take a good deep breath and join together in a moment of silence. So I would like to start tonight with a short prayer. I'd like to call forth our guides, our loved ones, our angels, our mentors, our family really, to join us tonight in our conversation. And let's make a commitment tonight that we will allow only that which expresses Christ consciousness and only that which is in harmony with the purpose of being. We turn within and join with that which expresses the will of God, if you will allow me to say it that way. Father, thy will be done. And so it is. Thank you again. Thank you again for joining me. I've really come to love our time together on Thursday nights and continuing to journey through the Course in Miracles, the textbook. We are also working on the workbook lessons. I'm trying to do those every day. I wasn't able to get it done today. So it's once or twice, hopefully no more than that this week, that I'll miss some of that. We're in review right now on day 58, would have been today. I'm going to eventually do those lessons, and I want to archive what we have been doing so that I'll create a web page and make that available so that someone that is joining us and starting in the future will have a library of my conversation about the workbook lessons. We're spending about half an hour when we do those lessons. We're doing them on blogtalkradio.com/course mastery, or go to blogtalkradio.com and just do a search for the best hour, but it's the best half hour. And you should be able to see the library of teachings that I've done there. I did some work back in 2013 and 14 that are still retrievable there. But my work and my study has come a long way since that 5 or 6 years ago. It is a continuous study. I know some people say, whoa, how long does it take to get through A Course in Miracles? You don't really ever get through it. You begin to create an access point. You begin to create, well, I'll say discover. It's already there. You're not really creating it. You're discovering that it's there. And it's really what I call an access point, because that has been my experience of communication, and like a portal of communication where you can really begin to have dialogue, internal dialogue, if you want to call it that. It's not coming from the outside world. It's not some entity visiting in your space. Not that that's not possible. But most of us would freak out, right? Wouldn't really be able to handle that if that were the case. So we are, I'll give you an analogy, maybe to kind of get our conversation started. There is such a thing as enlightenment. And I know that most of us say, I want it now, I want to have the experience of the awakened mind. I really want to transcend, if this world, if this identity as a body, if this experience isn't what's really real, then I want that. And that's been my mantra for a long time. But one of my teachers has shared with me something that eventually made a lot of sense to me, and I'll share it with you tonight. Imagine that you wanted to decide to be someone who would be a tightrope walker. And you've seen these people, right? They can, without a net, on a high wire, I mean literally across buildings that are stories high. And it freaks me out just to think about doing that, right? To think about walking across nothing more than a rope, being able to balance and to be in such tune with my body that I could walk across a thin rope, stories above the earth. That seems almost impossible, unimaginable. But let's say you had the desire to do that. You wouldn't start at the top of a multi-story building, and you wouldn't start without a net, right? We would start at a just off the, inches off the floor. So if you fall off the rope, you're just stepping off. Eventually, we would raise the level that you would be working with, because you would begin to develop balance. You would begin to be more and more certain, more and more confident, more and more certain is the word that keeps coming back, because it is a level of certainty that you would attain. And you could walk across this rope just inches off the floor again and again and again and again and again and again until you began to develop balance. And once you had developed balance, you would say, let's raise that a little higher. And then some point later, a little higher. But every time it's raised, every time you are elevated, you would raise it to a higher level. You would be doing so because you had attained another degree of balance. Now, I know this would be balance of the body and mind and the vibration of the rope and everything, the environment that you're operating in, everything would be in harmony. You would be able to harmonize with all of these variables eventually. And you would have a level of certainty. Yes, let's go to the next level. And eventually, it would be such a level that if you fell and lost balance, that there would be a rope, there would be a net there. I should say, there'll be a net there that would catch you so you wouldn't break your body. The journey of enlightenment, now this is a metaphor, right? But the journey of enlightenment requires ultimately balance of mind. A Course in Miracles is a beginning step of moving towards balance of mind, where you are not alone ever. You are joined in unity, in communion, in mind with the Holy Spirit, which is nothing more than your right mind. It is you. But we've blocked it out To the extent, dare I go there again, like the sleeping self blocks out you. It blocks out your reality as a human, literally, for the most part. The life you're living, the people you're living it with, where you're living it, who you work, the fact that you're even asleep at home, safe at home in bed. You block all of that out. There's no connection with this self that's in this conversation with me right now and your sleeping self, that little fragment of your mind, your mind split off. And that self is not in union with this self, this awakened human ego mind, personality self. That's what I'm talking about. So when we can get to the point where we can continuously, regularly, consistently, and with certainty know that when we go to sleep that we could still be awake, that we would be lucid even in the dreaming state, and know that we were asleep and not be afraid and not be hoodwinked by whatever the drama is, whatever the movie is, whatever the landscape is, whatever the imagination is of the sleeping self. We wouldn't be imprisoned by it. We wouldn't be confused by it. We would not be in fear because we would be in balance, knowing that dreams have no effect. We would know that with certainty. That's what I'm talking about. So I don't want to walk across a tightrope and be consumed by fear because I've risen too far off the ground, because my mind is untrained and I risk crashing, literally. People have had psychological breaks because they tried to go too high, too quick. Spirit is benevolent. The Holy Spirit is you and loves you, and it's self-love. Recognizing that it is one with God. There is no out of touchness. There's no disconnect. There's no doubt. There's no uncertainty. There is union. And the union that we are discovering and like working the body to be balanced so that we can walk that tightrope, it just takes practice. What's our practice? Being present. Our practice is being meditative. Our practice is studying A Course in Miracles relentlessly, right? So that these principles and these teachings can take us deeper and deeper. And my goodness, here I am all this time, I'm sorry, and you've been looking at the book. So you can see I'm focused. When we join in mind, a lot of what goes on out here in the material world is not that important. Spirit is not judging you. Spirit's not judging me. Spirit's with us all the time. So I'll apologize that we are, how many ever minutes we are into our conversation tonight before I even realized, that I didn't switch over to live stream, right? So yeah, there it is. And it doesn't matter. These things that the ego would say, oh, this is so important. What's important? How many people are watching? How many people are participating with us in this conversation? Is that important? No. Not to Spirit. Because because the will of God is already done. Ultimately, all of this is already done. It's already over. We're the ones who parsed it out, humans, with a fraction of that, right? With Spiritual Alchemy, some of the earlier videos that you'll find here on TrueMindShift.com, on this YouTube channel. We did have some interactive conversations, and we had a place where we had a whiteboard, and I love doing that too. I mean, I love doing this, but this being the studying of the Course in Miracles, we're just going to let it take whatever shape it does. We're going to that's the whole point. We allow only Christ consciousness to guide us. That's the connection. And we allow ourselves to become in balance. And who's in a hurry? The who that's in a hurry is the ego. It wants to control our spirituality. And so I'm asking that we allow only that which expresses Christ consciousness so that we can slow down. There is no hurry. Rajpur, who I am deeply in love with, is Jesus. And he started teaching this in 2002. That's who authored this book, right? Back in 65 to 72. And then eventually through another person who had become open enough, their mind open, discovered an access point, a portal, if you will, and had started having conversation. That person couldn't handle even the concept that, and that was Paul Tuttle, couldn't handle the conversation that this would be Jesus. So, but he could accept this spirit and entity that identified himself as Rajpur. And around 2002, after almost 2 decades, I guess it was at least 2 decades of channeling Jesus, he started teaching the Course in Miracles, right? And the last time I checked, he was on page somewhere around 400 450, somewhere around there, right? And he's still doing it. I mean, it's still available. The point is that no hurry. When are we going to finish A Course in Miracles? When we have transcended form, or when we have become completely elevated in form, in mind. We're the multi-story tightrope, joined in spirit. Let's call that the upper room. We're going to call that the upper room. We'll make that dedication tonight. Yeah, we're going to get to the point where we're going to study the book tonight at some point. And I appreciate your patience with me and ask for your forgiveness. I'm working through what I need to work through every time we're together. I don't know what's coming forth, what's coming next. But I'm grateful. I'm very grateful that we're allowing ourselves to be informed by Spirit. So we're going to hang out in the upper room, and we're going to be in a different balance of mind, a joining of mind in the upper room. And that's where we're connected. Nothing more than your right mind and my right mind are joined in the upper room as we venture forth through this course. And as we join each other there, and we do, as we join each other there, we're not alone. Spirit is with us. That Spirit is one in all, is all in all, one with God, if you will. And so I appreciate you allowing me my short conversation tonight as we're getting started, because I feel the energy now. I feel we're joined and we're good. And in the upper room, to be there, we have to leave the ego behind. It cannot venture into this light, into this higher level with us. It has to make way, because its ideas don't resonate there. They can't exist there. Just like the small sleeping self's drama and fears and misinterpretations of reality are not here with us now either. The small sleeping self isn't here with us now. We had to leave that behind when we woke up this morning, or this afternoon, if whenever you might have gone to sleep last. Okay, let's take a good deep breath again for a moment of silence, and we'll jump in and get started. So in gratitude we go forth. Let's start on paragraph 36. on page 23, chapter 2. And the atonement is the only defense which cannot be used destructively. I'll say this again because the word only is italicized. The atonement, we've discovered in our work so far that the atonement is literally a chain of forgiveness, a chain of miracles. Forgiveness is a miracle. It's a shift of perception. And this is a defense. Just like earlier, we were talking about the proper use of denial, right? And the atonement is the quote-unquote only, not quote-unquote, I'm going to say the italicized only defense, which cannot be used destructively. All other defenses of the ego self, then, we would be saying, all other defenses of the ego self are destructive. Anytime we're acting out of attack or acting out of any form of defense, which would be out of the fear, we're operating out of fear. Anytime we're doing that, we're acting destructively. And that's important for us to kind of consider that statement. That's because while everyone must eventually join it, which is the atonement, everyone's joining the party. Yeah, every one of us, we're eventually, that's what I'm saying. It's already done in God. God's will is already accomplished. And everyone must eventually join it. And it is not a device which was generated by man. The atonement is a device, if we want to call it that, as he's saying here, of the Holy Spirit, which is nothing more than your right mind, to bring you back into balance in union in mind. As Jesus said, when you see me, you see the Father. He was in perfect balance with Spirit. The atonement principle was in effect long before the atonement itself began. So the principle, really, as soon as we said, what would it be like to be separate, the tiny mad idea, could we be separate from God? And we began to imagine, as soon as we began to imagine that, the principle of truth was already at play. It had already begun. The principle was love, and the atonement itself was an act of love. It is the awakening of the sonship, all of us as children of God, awakening to the truth of who and what we are, joining in union with our true self. Acts were not necessary before the separation because the time-space belief did not exist. Dreaming is another way of saying that, did not exist. The idea of separation as a potential experience didn't really exist. It was only after the separation that the defense of atonement and the necessary conditions for its fulfillment were planned. It became, paragraph 37, it became increasingly apparent that all the defenses which man can choose to use constructively or destructively were not enough to save him. It was therefore decided that he needed a defense which was so splendid that he could not misuse it. Enter the atonement. Who's it becoming apparent to? All of our awakened brothers and sisters who, in some cases, have never chosen to be human. You've got, as we invited them in to join us in our conversation tonight, guides and angels and family and benevolent entities that are your brothers and sisters, cheering us on, because we're doing a mighty work here. And it'll be revealed as we venture forth into that upper room level of consciousness. Christ consciousness is the consciousness of the upper room. It was therefore decided that he needed humans, man, brothers and sisters, that we needed a defense that was so splendid that we couldn't misuse it. Although he could refuse it because you have free will. You can ignore spirit, your true mind, your true self. Your little sleeping self ignores you all night long until your body begins to, pull you out of it in the morning once it's regenerated and awake, beginning to awaken. His choice could not, however, turn it into a weapon of attack, which is the inherent characteristic of all other defenses. I'll say that again. All of the defenses is the inherent characteristic of all other defenses is that they can be turned into a weapon of attack. This would be the ego in operation. The atonement thus becomes the only defense which is not a two-edged sword. Paragraph 38 on page 23. The atonement actually began long before the crucifixion. Many souls offered their efforts on behalf of the separated ones. As I have said just moments ago, you are not alone. You're part of a big, huge family. And you are loved beyond your wildest imagination. And you are never, ever unattended. It's impossible. You're never unattended by love. But they could not, the separated ones could not withstand the strength of the attack and had to be brought back. The souls. Many souls offered their efforts on behalf of the separated ones, but they could not withstand the strength of the attack and had to be brought back. Angels came too, but their protection did not suffice because the separated ones were not interested in peace. Yeah, we're talking about us, right? We've been at war with ourselves, each other, really. Have you noticed? This didn't just start recently with the most recent administration of governance in whatever country we live in. Angels came too, but their protection did not suffice because the separated ones were not interested in peace. They'd already split their minds, and we've talked about split mind, right? And we're going to keep talking about it because we have to realize what we've done to ourselves so that we can let it go. They had already split their minds, that's us, and were bent on further dividing rather than reintegrating. We were bent on further dividing our minds. The levels they introduced into their minds turned against each other, and they established differences, divisions, cleavages, dispersions, and all the other concepts related to the increasing splits which they produced. Sounds horrible, right? We've been fractionating ourselves, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. Not being in their right minds, silly humans that we are, they turned their defenses from protection to assault and attacked literally insanely. It was essential to introduce a split-proof device, the atonement, which could be used only to heal if it were used at all. The atonement was built into the space-time belief in order to set a limit on the need for the belief and ultimately to make learning complete. We are here to learn, and we are learning, and ultimately the learning comes to an end, and we move beyond it. We've got to take the tightrope a little bit higher, though. We've got to move up a story or two, so to speak. Maybe even a few feet or a few inches can be pretty intimidating when we're still trying to establish the balance that we need to be in mind so that we can relinquish our defenses. That's what A Course in Miracles is helping us to do. The atonement is the final lesson. It's a defense against separation. And it is the final lesson. Learning itself, like the classrooms in which it occurs, here he says, is temporary. I love how Spirit kind of plays with us and is participating in our conversation, letting the cat out of the bag a little early. Atonement itself, like the classrooms in which it occurs, is temporary. The ability to learn has no value when change of understanding is no longer necessary. It's a temporary state of existence, of a temporary state of development. The eternally creative have nothing to learn. That would be your right mind. Your soul, self, capital S soul, has nothing to learn. All we need to do is to connect with it, to join with it, to unify with it, to commune with it, to dialogue with it, to access it, to discover it. Only after the separation was it necessary to direct the creative forces to learning, because changed behavior had become mandatory. Changed behavior. When you were hoodwinked into believing you were separated and began to have a dream of separation, we established defenses to be able to feel safe in this experience. And we still do it now, don't we? We still continue to do it. Changed behavior had become necessary or mandatory. Men can learn to improve their behavior and can also learn to become better and better learners. This is good news, right? This serves to bring them into closer and closer accord with the sonship. But the sonship itself is a perfect creation. And perfection is not a matter of degree. It just is. Perfection is what you are. And as Raj has shared with us and I've shared with you, you're neither behind the point of perfection nor advancing toward it. And you must see yourself therefrom. Only where there are different degrees is learning meaningful. The evolution of man is merely a process by which he proceeds from one degree to the next. We're moving the tightrope a couple of more inches, maybe this evening, tonight, today, whenever you're watching this conversation, participating in this conversation, we're never not joined in mind. And thank you again for being a mighty companion and joining me in this journey. The sonship itself is a perfect creation. The unity of all of us together, joined in mind, is what we already are. It is a perfect creation. And so I often get well, why would we be separated? Why do we think that because we chose all power unto heaven and earth is yours to pretend and to play? You're a child. I'm a child. We're children of God. Children play and like to have fun. Nothing wrong with it. No judgment in spirit. The evolution of man is merely a process by which he proceeds from one degree to the next. He corrects his previous missteps by stepping forward. We could call that misperceptions. This represents a process which is actually incomprehensible in temporal terms because he returns as he goes forward. Wow, where did I saw something this week. Where was it? It escapes me now, but there were these teachers having conversations about the writings of the Bible, about, God, I can't remember it now, but it was basically so plain to me as they were saying it, and I'm not good at quoting the Bible. You'll have to forgive me for that. But basically, they were trying to make sense of the phraseology in the Bible, the teaching in the Bible, where, the first become, it was about the meek. That's what it was. It was about, the meek shall inherit the earth. And so the first shall be last, and the last shall be first, right? Jesus said it this way in the Gospel of Thomas, which was discovered with the Dead Sea Scrolls, right? And it was Thomas, evidently, the disciple Thomas, evidently would just write down sayings of Jesus. He didn't try to interpret them. He didn't, and I have heard since that there was stuff added to it after the fact, so to speak, that others, quote unquote, scholars tried to interpret a bit of what Thomas scribed as Jesus' sayings and so forth. But basically, for the most part, it's there. And it was originally written in Arabic, so, it's a little bit difficult sometimes for Arabic to be translated to English anyway. But basically, here's the deal. Basically, he was telling the story of how the disciples had come to him and were asking, okay, so how will we know, Master? They called Jesus Master. So how will we know, Master, when we are at the end? Because he had been doing a teaching on, awakening. He's still doing a teaching on awakening right here tonight. This is Jesus' work, right? But anyway, he's like, and the disciples were like trying to figure it out, trying to understand his teaching. Obviously, he was way elevated. When you see me, you see the Father. This was the awakened Holy Spirit communicating through Jesus. And so he's like, when will we, the disciples are like, so when will we know that we're at the end? When will we have attained the end of our journey? And Jesus responded, he replied by saying, so, you're at the beginning then? You see how brilliant that is? When the first is last and the last is first, when the meek will inherit the earth, you're at the beginning then? When you wake up from, I'm seeing if this works. When you wake up from sleeping, aren't you back to where you were before you fell asleep? Yeah. You go lay down in bed, and where do you wake up at? Right where the body was left at. You go right back to the beginning before you fell asleep. Does that make sense? I think so. So, Jesus said, you're at the beginning then? I loved his quizzical nature and playing with us. Yeah, you were probably there, right? You're here now. You're on the leading edge of the light workers in this generation who are making a huge difference in the consciousness of the world. Because your mind is opening, you're evolving, you are becoming the elevated self of form, moving to the upper room, raising the tightrope. I love it. So he corrects his previous missteps by stepping forward, and this represents a process which is actually incomprehensible in temporal terms because the cat cannot drive the car. It is not going to get it. But there is an aspect of you, which is the Christ self, which is capable of learning and awakening, remembering, and connecting with our true self. Because he returns as he goes forward. So you're at the beginning then? The beginning is the end. When you wake up, you're right back to the point in mind where you fell asleep. Paragraph 41, page 24. I'm just filled with such gratitude tonight. So I'm just, I feel this wash of love, and sometimes it catches me unexpectedly, because we are joined in spirit right now, totally. And I really feel the energy in it, and let's take a good deep breath and close our eyes for just a moment, and just go to the heart space, and ask yourself, how do I feel? What am I feeling? Do you feel a sense of gratitude? This is about sidestepping, moving back that thinking mind, and going to the heart, and beginning to be connected in feeling. So let's just take a good deep breath for just a moment before we begin this next paragraph. I just keep hearing, I love you. And I feel joy. So thank you. Number 41, paragraph 41. The atonement is a device by which you and I can free ourselves from the past as we go ahead. I love it. It undoes our past errors, thus making it unnecessary for us to keep retracing our steps without advancing to our return. The atonement, as we've said, is a chain of forgiveness. So forgiveness, moving back, and we've, in earlier discussions, we've talked about this, and this was what's been given to me, my way of explaining it, so I'll put it that way. Moving back before we gave judgment. Forgiveness. What were we giving? Judgment. So forgiveness is moving back before we put any meaning on anything that we've experienced, whatever is playing out, the meaning that we're giving it. Moving back before we gave judgment. Man, did I give some judgment out today? But this isn't a witch hunt to make yourself feel guilty, because your ego mind, that's what it does. And it's not who you are. You're off the hook. Really, literally, completely. It's like, okay, making yourself feel guilty because your small sleeping self saw a dream and it became a nightmare and was working to defend itself against some perceived attack, and you woke up and you realized that the small sleeping self was confused, even though you really believed it was you while you were doing it. But as soon as you saw that you were sleeping, that it was just the illusory small sleeping self mind, and it had a dream of some drama, you didn't buy into its idea that it was defending itself, or its idea that it was guilty, or its idea that something was wrong. You just simply sidestepped it altogether. You came back to the beginning and you said, wait a minute, dreams have no effect. There's nothing to forgive because it's not really real. See? Yeah. I'm going to read that. This is an important sentence, so I'm going to read it again. The atonement, paragraph 41, the atonement is the device by which we can free ourselves from the past as we go ahead. It undoes our past errors, thus making it unnecessary for us to keep retracing our steps without advancing to our return. In this sense, the atonement saves time, maybe a few thousand years. But like the miracle, which is a sudden shift of perception, which serves it, the miracle serves the process of atonement. It does not abolish it. So let's read that again and make sure we understand. In this sense, the atonement saves time, but like the miracle which serves it, does not abolish it. Miracles do not abolish the atonement. The atonement saves time, Oh, excuse me, wrong. The it that he's referring to is time. So I apologize for my misreading that, or misinterpreting it briefly. In this sense, now with that in mind, let's read it again. In this sense, the atonement saves time, but like the miracle which serves it, does not abolish it. So he's saying that the atonement and or the miracle, neither one abolish time. They serve each other. The miracle serves the atonement. The atonement does not abolish time. As long as there is a need for atonement, there is need for time. Okay, see, that makes sense now, right? But the atonement, as a completed plan, does have a unique relationship to time. Until the atonement is finished, its various phases will proceed in time, but the whole atonement stands at time's end. So you're back to the beginning then? At this point, the bridge of the return has been built. The bridge of the return to the beginning. When we came up with this crazy, insane, tiny mad idea that we could pretend to be separate from God, that we could pretend to not know ourselves, that we could pretend to have private thoughts, that we could pretend to be in judgment and give everything a name and give everything all the meaning that it has, and to play God, really, to pretend to play God, to have our own thoughts separate from the thoughts of God. And if the thoughts of God are only thoughts of love, right? If we were going to have thoughts separate from God's, then our thoughts would have to be something other than the thoughts of God, other than love. We could never really do it. We could never really separate ourselves from ourselves. The small sleeping self, as much as it believes it's not, that it is you, and that it's having an experience of reality while you're safe at home in bed, it can't really be you, because it's not all of you. It doesn't even know that you're safe at home in bed. And it doesn't know that its thoughts aren't private, because you're there, you're checking it out, you're participating. Let's see if we can get this next paragraph in tonight before we finish. The atonement is a total commitment. I love how he starts out, when we're just beginning in our study of A Course in Miracles, and it's like, all it takes is a little willingness, just a little willingness. But as we go deeper into our journey, once you really make a commitment to walk all the way across that tightrope, even if it's 3 inches off the ground, you've made a huge, huge, huge shift. So you could take a couple of steps, and as you might imagine, a lot of people who might have even considered it or tried it, take a few steps, fall off the rope. It's like, no, it's too much effort. It's too much work. I'm going to go back to my perceived life, whatever it might be. But if you really want to get from this side to the other side, across the bridge, the tightrope, you have to make a full-on commitment. But here's the deal. Once you've mastered it, you can walk across that tightrope with no safety net, stories hundreds of feet above the ground, fearlessly, because there is no fear, because there is only certainty. I know that's hard to imagine. It is, obviously, hard to imagine. But what happens there, you see, is that little thin rope that maybe is just, an inch wide, if that, or whatever, it becomes an entire platform. You no longer see it as this little thin rope. It becomes a very wide pathway. And you dance on it as you go across it because you're now perceiving it in a whole new way. Because you've made total commitment to seeing the pathway. You're now on a wide, elevated bridge. And while others are seeing a little rope that appears to be extremely life-threatening and dangerous and difficult, you're dancing across it. This teaching gives you the ability to dance through every day in joy. The atonement is the principle. We start out walking a tightrope. I get it. I mean, I'm living it with you. It's hard not to judge. Oh my God, here we are, on the 27th of February in 2020. And the coronavirus, and we've talked about it, and we'll keep talking about it because it's a great case in point. The fear that's been generated intentionally, much of it intentionally. Make no mistake, the thought system of the world is intentional in its teaching, and we're learning it. When we repeat it, the teacher is the learner, and when we repeat it, we are teaching it. When we take on fear, it becomes what we're teaching. And when we're teaching it, we're solidifying it. We're making commitment to it, and we're solidifying it as a part of our belief system, and it becomes, because the world is reflective, our experience. So this coronavirus is a perfect case in point. There are untold, the example has been made that I'll just say millions, but the term has been used, billions of bacteria and virus that we are exposed to continuously. And we've identified not even 24 viruses and created vaccines and created horror stories that if we don't take action, if we don't buy into the fear and do something to defend ourselves, to protect ourselves. You see, this is defense, and defenses, as we've discovered tonight, are destructive. Are we not witnessing that in this example, that this fear of this coronavirus is destructive? It's destructive to our economy globally. It's destroying companies. It's destroying livelihoods. And the number of people that are being destroyed by the coronavirus is nothing compared to the people's lives that are being impacted in a horrific way because of the fear that's being promoted. And fear is false evidence appearing real. It's nothing. It's nothing. It's a lie. We can say no. We can turn within to this inner voice and simply ask the question. We join in dialogue and we ask the question, what is the truth? And we let that voice be our guidance. Well, what if I were to get the coronavirus? Well, you might die, but you can't die because God didn't create death. And you've already experienced that anyway. Where's that at now? I know that's an extreme. Let me back up. What can we do? Eat well, exercise, sleep well, help your body's immune system do what it does. Protects you from millions and millions of viruses and bacteria every day. If you ever cut your finger or had any kind of a tear in the skin that protects your body, the epidermal system, have you not noticed that if you don't put on an antiseptic, something that protects the skin, because the skin now is vulnerable to what? Bacteria and viruses. You get an infection. Your body goes to you can help your body, but your body eventually will defeat it. Your immune system, that's what it does. I am now of the belief that the most important vaccine we'll ever be able to develop is to assist the body in its perfect immune system. It is designed perfectly. And we can support it by taking care of the body, by loving the body. Love yourself. Loving yourself is the most powerful vaccine you'll ever be able to give yourself. I do not, and do have no, this is me. Don't follow anything, don't believe anything I tell you. Find out for yourself. But for me, my plan is to love myself enough that I can get my butt up in the morning and go to the gym and exercise. That tomorrow, because I didn't do a good job today, I didn't do a bad job, but I can certainly do better, that tomorrow I will endeavor to eat better. And tonight I will endeavor to sleep better. And I certainly will not be afraid and buy into and not have a good night of sleep because I'm afraid that tomorrow when I leave the house that I'm going to be at risk of a virus. That's ridiculous to me. And so forgive me for my rant, because we didn't get through that paragraph. The paragraph is 42. So let's begin there next week. The atonement is a total commitment. Total commitment. So let's close our eyes. Let's take a good deep breath. And I'm going to close with prayer because our time together has come to an end for tonight. But we'll still be together. All right, let's take a good deep breath. Thank you, Mother, Father, God, for this time together tonight, this teaching, this channeling, this work that's coming through, this challenge, this request to have a full-on commitment to walk across this tightrope in practice and not be afraid of the fall, because we are not being threatened by anything other than fear. I am in need of nothing but the truth. I sought for many things and found despair. Now I seek but one, for in that one is all I need and only what I need. All that I sought before I needed not and did not even want. My only need I did not recognize. But now I see that I need only truth. In that all needs are satisfied, all cravings end, all hopes are finally fulfilled, and dreams are gone. Now have I everything that I could need. Now have I everything I could want. And now at last I find myself at peace. God bless. And for that peace, our Father, we give thanks. What we denied ourselves, you've restored. And only that is what we really want. So as we turn within this week in our meditation, we establish that dialogue. And even if we feel that we are not able to listen, we will endeavor to communicate and ask, and we will endeavor to listen, and we will endeavor to persist, to take one or two more steps out a little further on that line and ask the question, what is the truth? And listen. Don't fill in the blank. We will listen. We make a commitment. We make a firm, total commitment. One more step across that line. And we'll be blessed. I promise you. You'll know you are absolutely blessed. You are loved, loving, and lovable forever and ever. Amen, my brothers and sisters. I love you. And I'm so grateful that we got a chance to spend some time together with this book tonight, that we got a chance to spend some time together with each other. I know you are there. I love you for being there. I appreciate you. God bless. And we will be back again next week. And so it is.